So we're going to do another example of understanding regression. So this one involves using a data set that I've posted. So do make sure that you have access to that. That's one of your things inside your module to actually have this data set called Missed Final Regression. So we want to make sure, again, you feel comfortable using StatCrunch to get the output. So that's going to be the first thing that we're going to do is actually get the StatCrunch output for this. So you're going to want to find that file and save it to a location such as your desktop so you know where to find it. Then we're going to upload that data, searching to find where you've saved that. So mine's on my flash drive is where I have mine. Gives a little snapshot of what it looks like, and we're just going to upload it. Now we have this output here on the next page. So we have a scatter plot as well as some output that we're going to need. I've deleted some of the output that we didn't need for your handout, so we're going to get a lot more than this when I do actually show it in StatCrunch here. So now that we have our data set, first to get the graph, we'll just go to Graph, Scatterplot. This is where you have to know your X and your Y. So going back to our problem, we are trying to predict someone's final exam score based upon how many classes that they missed. So the number of classes that they missed is their explanatory variable, and the final exam score is what we're trying to predict. Right now, I'm just going to hit compute to get that scatter plot that you see there. Okay, so there is that. Next, we're going to get the full output that we need for all of the questions. So kind of scrolling ahead here. We're going to want to look at a student who missed one class as well as a student who missed 4 classes. I'm going to predict for those values as well here. So we're going to go to that Stat, Regression, Simple Linear, put in our X and our Y. I'm going to go ahead and scroll to where that prediction is. So we're going to predict for 1 missed class and 4 missed classes. And then just hit compute. So here is that intercept and slope estimate that I provided for you. And then here are those predicted values for the 2 different X scores that we need. So here you should see these same values as well as these same values here out in our StatCrunch. Okay, so that was first just making sure we felt good with the StatCrunch side. Now that we've done that, we can go through and work the problem. Again, please make note of questions that you have as we're going through this, that you know where you can either post questions or email me questions as well. So the 2 variables that we recorded were the number of classes missed and the final exam score. Now, number of classes missed is going to be a quantitative variable, as well as your final exam score. So again, the idea of regression is when we have 2 quantitative variables that we're trying to see the relationship between. Which variable is our response variable? We want to see how final exam grade is impacted. So that's why that's going to be our response variable. It's our outcome of interest. We think it's explained by number of classes missed. Now, would it make sense to do linear regression, type of association we would expect? We're going to kind of go through those questions attached to our scatter plot. So looking at our relationship here, does it seem curved? No, so I'm going to call it reasonably straight. I see a negative trend, which would mean the more classes a student misses, I expect their exam score to go down. Our other questions is looking at how strong the relationship is. And again, this is somewhat subjective. I mean, there's definitely a pattern there, so I might say somewhat strong. And is there anything unusual? I mean, I'd probably say that this point over here sort of seems like an outlier, because even though this one's sort of far away, it still kind of fits that pattern that I see, versus this one's kind of also outside that pattern a little bit more. So I would call this one my outlier. If you wanted to here in StatCrunch, right, you can kind of see exactly where that number is. You could also highlight it so that you could actually find it here in your data set. It was actually the very last one that we entered here, so it was actually the lowest final exam score was by someone who missed only 3 classes. So you can kind of see those numbers as well. So now let's actually write this out. So I will say that the relationship between number of classes missed it is linear. It's not curved. And it seemed to have a negative slope. Which of course then means that more classes miss generally leads to a lower final exam score. The relationship is somewhat strong. With an outlier of a student who missed 3 classes that got a 29 on the final. Next, we're asked for that equation. So this is where we're going to use that slope and intercept that we found out here in StatCrunch, as well as that's in your notes on that next page here. Down here are that intercept and slope. So writing out that equation now. Our slope is negative, which again we expected here, times our x, and our intercept was 88.6725. So I'm just using those 2 numbers there. We're going to interpret the slope and intercept, if appropriate, in the context of the problem. So let's go ahead and do slope first, because again, we always interpret slope. So again, first just thinking this through. So it's as x gets bigger by 1. Okay, so you miss 1 more class. So if you miss 1 more class, we expect your final exam score, your y, to go down, right? That's what the slope being negative is telling me, by about 5.22 points. Let's write this out together. So missing one more class, no matter how many you've already missed, but missing one more class is expected to result in a 5.2225 point decrease in final exam score. So that's what that slope is telling us. So this time you saw a negative slope interpretation. Now for the intercept, remember that those 3 questions we need to ask before we can decide if we're going to interpret it. So our first question is, does x equal 0 make sense? So our x is the missed classes. So can you miss 0 classes? Yep. So that seems okay. Can y, which is our final exam score, be close or approximately equal to our value of b? So could you get about an 88.6725, 88.89 on the final exam? Why, yes. Our third question is wanting to know if we have any data near that x equals 0, which would be having 0 missed classes. Well, in fact, we actually have students in our data set who missed no classes. So, yes. Now, because all of these are yes, that means we are going to interpret our intercept now. So we're not done. Now we actually got to interpret this number. So basically now 88.6725 actually means something for me. But an intercept is very specific. So here's our interpretation. So a student who missed no classes, so 0 classes, that's what the intercept means, x equals 0, is expected to score an 88.6725 on the final exam. So it is literally saying when x equals 0, here's where I expect that score to be. And if you prefer looking at the Scatterplot that actually has the line on it, it's telling us basically where it's crossing that axis there. Okay, how are you feeling about slope interpretation? And now see an example where we have interpreted the intercept compared to example 1 where we did not interpret the intercept. Okay, let's move on to the next question. What final exam score would we expect from a student who missed one class? Well, we already had our equation. So I'm just going to rewrite that out here. And so when I said missed one class, that's telling me that x equals 1. So let's just plug that into our equation. And we should get 83.45 points. Now what's nice is since we actually do have a graph to look at, we could say, okay, if you miss one class, getting around that 83.45 seems like that makes sense from my picture. So it seems to kind of be fitting what we're seeing in our actual data as well. Because the number I get should make sense based upon my data, since I used my data to get that equation that I'm just looking at. Now, if a student who missed 4 classes received a 62 on the final, what would their residual be? Okay, let's talk about what numbers I was given here first. All right, so missed 4 classes. So x is 4. Received a 62 on the final. That's their actual score on the final. So that's a value of y. Now when I'm asked to find the residual, that's e that I'm being asked to find, which is y minus y hat. Well, I have y, but I don't have y hat. Oh, but how can I find y hat? Well, I have this equation. I have my value of x to plug in, so I can find my value of y hat. So then y hat will just be negative 5.2225 times my value of x of 4 plus that intercept that we had there. And so we would get 67.7825 for my predicted value of y. So then now my actual residual is the actual value they've got, and I subtract off that predicted value I just found, which this time does actually get me a negative number. So I get negative 5.7825 here. So why is it negative? Well, it's negative because the student scored lower than expected. So then this student scored 5.7825 points less than predicted on the final exam. Right, so where did that negative sign go? Right there. Right, so we're not going to actually leave the negative in the interpretation. We're interpreting what that negative is actually telling us here. Now, this 83.45 and 67.7825 are also values that you see down here. These extra options that I got from StatCrunch there. So those are those predicted values that we just calculated in parts E and F that we needed up here. So hopefully at this point you're feeling comfortable with using StatCrunch, feeling okay with interpreting a scatterplot, interpreting slope, deciding whether or not to interpret the intercept, and interpreting the intercept if you needed to, finding predicted values, calculating residuals, and interpreting them. If you have questions on any of that material, please be sure to drop me emails or ask questions as needed. Because in the next video, we are going to move on to something new.